Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, with us in the studio now. South Africa has scrapped the controversial birth certificate rule, and the Minister of Home Affairs has signed a waiver which allows foreign children to enter the country without carrying additional supporting documents such as unabridged birth certificates and consent letters. And Minister, it's good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Thabo, and thank you to the viewers out there.
So as of Friday, it is no longer a requirement for those who are traveling from outside of South Africa, bringing in their children to have an unabridged birth certificate or any sort of supporting document. This, however, does not mean that these are not required at some point in the application process.
All we're saying is, remember the requirement was that you must carry an unabridged birth certificate on yourself. That was the requirement, that when you get into the plane or the ship, or if you are traveling by car, you are going to go over a land post, you must carry the unabridged birth certificate on yourself. And we are saying that is no longer a requirement. We did not carry it. Everything that is required must be done when you apply for a passport and a visa in those countries that needs a visa to come here. Once those are issued, then you come, you don't have to carry anything on your person. That's what we say.
Why that change in position? Because your predecessor had put this policy in place to curb, and that's the reason what was given human trafficking.
Yeah, indeed. It was introduced about 5 years ago to curb human trafficking. But it had a very serious unintended consequence of bringing down the tourism figures. And so a debate ensued because the Minister of Tourism and the whole tourism industry were very unhappy about that. And after reviewing it, you have to check what is in the best interest of the country. And we realized that one of the cornerstones of President Ramaphosa's government now is job creation. And tourism is a job creator. You don't interfere with tourism in order to achieve other aims. Then we reached a conclusion that child trafficking can be fought using other methods that are available. You don't have to use this one because it was not the only one that will stop child trafficking after all.
Requirement for foreigners coming into the country, but it is a requirement for South Africans traveling outside. You don't think that it would hamper tourism either way?
No, Thabo, I think it's very good that you ask this question because people confuse it and sometimes use it interchangeably. When a visitor, was an unabridged birth certificate which you carry on yourself. The other one is in terms of the Children Act, which simply say, when an adult is leaving this country with a minor child, we want consent from the other parent because the child has got two parents. We want to see whether both of them are agreeing that the child must go out. This is for a different reason. The reason being that we don't want couples in South Africa, when they fight, to use the child as a pawn and say, I'm going to show this man or this woman. I'm taking this child out of the country, never to be seen anymore. So that's all we are saying. We want a consent from the other parent to make sure that this child is not just leaving because there's a squabble between...
I honestly think it's the same, Minister. I mean, because people can be fighting from somewhere in North America and the husband decides, I'm going to take the child and we're going to South Africa and we're going to allow him to come in without that consent.
That must be solved in that country. It's a problem with that country. It's not ours. It's a couple fighting in that country. The Minister of Home Affairs in that country must protect their children and the couple and solve it. I am solving it here for South African children and for South African parents. And it has already yielded results, by the way, Thabo. Well, you remember during that big hullabaloo about Nigerians going home, a plane having been sent.
That's right.
To collect them.
Come and collect them. Yes. About 300 of them.
Yes, we rescued four South African children who were living without the knowledge of their mothers. They were not going to see them again.
Right.
We applied this law and said, look, is there consent from the mother? And found that the mothers did not even know that their children are leaving to Nigeria. So if we allow them to leave, their mothers were going to remain here complaining very bitterly. So that's why we made that particular law. Yes. So the issue of visiting was not to protect couples, was to stop child trafficking. We'll use another method. But the issue is a different one. We'll still have to apply it as I'm giving you. These examples about children who nearly went to Nigeria. Perhaps their mothers were never going to see them again. Yes.
It's a broad statement. The criticism of generally this administration and the previous administration would be that you make populist decisions without having done some kind of study with empirical evidence as to what your actions are actually going to be. Case in point is that this visa regime change actually impacted the tourism industry in real terms, in numbers, in terms of people wanting to come into the country. What do you envisage will be the impact now of this reversal?
Well, the impact we think it must revert back to where it was before this requirement was made. I'm sorry I wasn't there, and I'm not sure about what studies were made and all that when the conclusion was reached. All I know, because I was in cabinet, was that ever since this law was introduced, there's never been peace between the Ministry of Tourism and Home Affairs. So the Ministry of Tourism has always raised it from the beginning as an issue. And the Ministry of Home Affairs was saying, no, but what about child trafficking? So when it reached a crescendo and we realized that job creation is extremely important, we then said, but child trafficking has got many other tools and instruments which can be used. Why don't we put this aside and see if we can use that instrument, if the main reason was really child trafficking? So that to avoid this contradiction between the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Home Affairs, but also the tourism industry itself, but also because one of the mainstays of President Ramaphosa's government now is job creation, as you know.
And you don't see yourself promoting in any way human trafficking from other countries. You might have very tight borders, and people maybe will want to argue with you how tight the South African borders are. And you will not want to let children get in and out. You managed to save 4. But what happens with human trafficking syndicates that are operating from outside of other countries? South Africa could possibly see itself as the human trafficking capital of the world because it's no longer
will be caused by the removal of this law, because child trafficking never stopped when this law was introduced. What happened is tourism figures went down. So we are saying we will use other methods. For instance, when people come here, we look at it very carefully. There are people who come from countries where we require visas. During the visa application, we'll make sure about all those facts. And remember, one of the things which the public doesn't know is that nobody flies into South Africa, gets into a plane from any part of the world and fly here without us knowing that this person is coming. We're always giving that information.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I want us to talk about the legal costs that are escalating. The DG saying the contingent liability of civil action for 2019 totaling on the other side of 2 billion rands. That and more with the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, with us when your reporting continues. Do stay with Newsroom Africa, Channel 405.